The best of money matters. Wealth Tracker.
Welcome to the Wealth Tracker, where we dive into the uncharted territories of niche investment strategies that promise to redefine wealth. Hello, I'm Hongbin Jeong. Now, gold has been hitting new record highs, capturing the attention of investors and market analysts alike. While the surge in gold prices has dominated headlines, silver's performance has somewhat subdued in comparison. Now, despite often being seen as the poor man's gold, silver has its own unique market dynamics that set it apart. So will the price of silver follow gold higher? Well, to find out more, joining me now is Gregor Gregersen, who's the founder of the Silver Bullion Group. Gregor, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. All right, Gregor, gold prices have hit all-time highs this year, and the metal has dominated headlines. But what about silver? Is silver seeing the same shine? How are silver prices faring at the moment?
Well, silver did pretty well this year. It was up about 20%. But then we had a flash crash late last week along with the markets.
Right.
And it's still up 4 to 5%. So not too bad. And most importantly, silver is just very, very cheap compared to gold right now.
Right. Well, as you mentioned, up until last week with the Trump tariff, silver has been climbing, though not the same breakout conviction as gold. Spot silver, as you mentioned, was up nearly 20% year to date and briefly tested $35, a level not seen since 2011. However, it remains well below its all-time highs, especially now, right? Why is silver facing such resistance then?
I think the primary reason is that a lot of people are not familiar with silver. Most investment vehicles will buy gold, and so people don't always know how to buy it. And I think that's really the key reason. Sometimes I call silver the forgotten metal because it is extremely important, but it is not something that most investors will go as a first choice. It's usually a second choice after they go into gold.
Right. So if you're saying silver is a forgotten metal and not a lot of people or investors know much about silver, what drives, the movement of silver prices then?
Silver has a big industrial use and is a very, very important metal for things like solar panels and so on. But then it also has a monetary side. And from a monetary side, when precious metals tend to go up and you're in a bull market, then you usually see gold going up and silver will normally follow suit later as people are starting to look for something that's less expensive compared to gold.
Okay, so what factors could push silver prices higher at this given moment?
Well, some of the things that I think is the most important is for people to realize how cheap it is, because there's a gold-silver ratio, which measures how inexpensive or expensive silver is compared to gold. And in nature, the ratio is 16 to 1. So there are 16 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold. And yesterday, we hit 104. So you need 104 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. And I believe that was the second lowest price of silver in history compared to gold. Back in COVID, we had a high of 122. And I think the next highest was during World War II. In the US, we had 95. So hitting 104 just makes silver very, very inexpensive. And as investors realize, it's almost like picking up money off the street because silver will readjust to a longer-term average eventually, which is around 60. And so I tell people, if you want to buy gold, buy silver first. And switching to gold later, and you'll get 50% more gold.
Okay. And as you mentioned, silver has often followed gold's lead, and investors will tend to go to silver once gold is too expensive, right? And given gold has, hit new highs over and over again, do you believe that silver will eventually catch up with gold, or do you foresee a different trend emerging?
I believe that history will repeat itself. Normally an investor will say, well, gold is $3,000 now. I should have bought at $2,000, Darren. But, what else is out there? And then if they look at silver, they will see that we had a high of about 48 about a decade ago. And they will say, well, okay, it's still 30-40% below its all-time high. And gold-silver ratio makes it really cheap. Maybe I'm better off buying silver. And the key thing to understand about silver, the market is much smaller. So you only need a small amount of funds going into silver to really move the price up higher.
Well, silver has a variety of industrial uses as well, unlike gold, as you mentioned earlier. How do industrial demands for silver, for example, in electronics or solar energy, impact its price compared to gold, which has more of a safe haven appeal?
Well, there's a really interesting story behind this because I think the main story behind silver on the industrial side is solar panel demand. And solar panels have just exploded. I mean, the Chinese production of these solar panels has increased incredible numbers. And the thing to understand why silver is so important is if you are a producer of a solar panel, you normally need to give a 25-year warranty. And people try to use copper instead of silver because copper is a lot cheaper.
Right.
But copper tends to oxidize, meaning after 10, 12 years, the solar panel might fail. And then you have a huge problem as a manufacturer because you have to replace that solar panel. And there were some companies who did that, and they're out of business now. So people in the industry basically learned you have to use silver. You cannot skip on it. They found various ways of reducing the amount of silver by just putting a very thin layer on top of copper wires to protect it, but you still have to use it. And so as time passed and more panels were created, they were able to reduce the amount of silver per panel by 80%.
Okay.
But now we're at a point where you cannot reduce it anymore, and the new panels actually are using more silver. And at the same time, the production of panels is just increasing, almost exponentially because they've become so cheap. And that makes silver, one of the most important green metals. It's not something that's being talked about a lot, but it's, I think, something that's going to be more and more in the news in the future.
Right. Well, given this demand, especially, how the world is going into this, sustainable push here, and with solar panels booming over in China and the demand for silver is there, overall, are investors, increasingly eyeing silver? Are they investing more into silver, you think?
Yes, and I think the primary reason is the gold-silver ratio. So we are seeing clients which are moving really large amounts of funds. They're basically selling the gold and buying the silver.
Okay.
And we're talking, $40, $50, $60 million worth of at a time. And it's essentially because if you look at this gold-silver ratio, silver is so cheap. You switch into it, you wait for the ratio to fall back to around 50. And you get twice as much gold when you switch back into gold. So that's the mentality behind it. It's not a mainstream thing yet, but, there are lots of investors that we are seeing which are starting to do this now.
Okay. Well, overall, do you think there is a shift happening in how investors are viewing precious metals, especially considering the current, stellar run for gold?
Most definitely. And it's also important to highlight that there's a shift towards physical precious metals. Because a lot of investment options out there are for paper, which is not really backed by any physical gold. And we're seeing a lot more investors wanting to have the physical. And then as they become more familiar with the industry, they tend to choose increasingly silver just because it's so cheap compared to gold right now.
Well, you mentioned eyeing the gold and silver ratio there. Is that the key indicator or metric that you would suggest keeping an eye on to, predict silver's price movements in the near future, or are there other key metrics?
I think the gold-silver ratio is the best. I give you an example back during COVID times. Often it happens that when you have a crisis, precious metals tend to fall, the spot price. And silver flash crashed back then and back in 2000 from $18 down to $12. And that's when the ratio went up to 122. But within 3 months, silver went from $12 to $28. And so you just sort of had this ping-pong effect where it just sort of ended up surging quite dramatically. And if you follow this guideline, you would have sold the silver as it surges back up. And that's why I really like this ratio, because it will help you get out of something which then ends up being overbought at a certain point.
So for investors looking to diversify their portfolios here with precious metals, how would you advise balancing investments between gold and silver at this point in time?
Right now, I'm very much a silver bug. So personally, most of my money is in silver. And I would say if you're not familiar, maybe consider at least 50% in silver because there's not much you can do wrong at this point in time.
Okay. Is there a particular strategy you would, recommend for someone looking to take advantage of the current gold-silver price divergence?
Most definitely. So I just did a pretty big personal investment yesterday. I bought 10,000 silver Britannia coins. And that's a specific type of silver coin. The reason why I like this so much is when you buy physical, you have two types of prices. You have the spot price, official price of silver, and you have the premiums that you have to pay for that specific item.
Right.
Now, when you buy a silver bar, a big 1,000 ounce, you might be paying 60 cents premium. If you buy a coin, you might be paying $3 premium. So why do you pay $3 extra? Well, the $3 in itself is a kind of investment because during COVID, as an example, a lot of investors start to want to buy these coins. And the premium went up to $10 above spot. So basically, these $3 became $10. So it's a bit of like investment in itself.
Okay.
And usually when times are normal, the mints have plenty of coins and you're paying $2.50 to $3. But once you go into a crisis and we have a repeat of the $10, then you will just switch back out of the coins and go back into bars. And, we received some news that some of the mints are going on allocation yesterday as they see more demand. And most importantly, the Britannia coins are really interesting because they're made by the Royal Mint in Britain. And the British government decided to exempt Britannia coins from taxation. So capital gain taxes. If you're Singaporean, we don't pay this stuff, so we're quite lucky. But usually capital gain tax is very painful. And if you can be exempted of it, that makes a lot of sense. So if you have to choose one coin, you might as well get the Britannia coin because you're not paying anything extra. And even if you are not subject to this tax, somebody else will probably pay a premium for it. And so silver Britannia coins is sort of what I'm going for right now.
Oh, some great insights there. Well, Gregor, before we let you go here, are there any major events or shifts in the market that could trigger a major price change for silver in the coming months or weeks?
I think the primary interesting factor for precious metals now is just the lack of confidence people have in the system overall.
Right.
And more and more people, I think, are worried about what's happening, so they don't always know what to do exactly. And usually once they get into the world of physical precious metals, they start to realize that it's something that's apolitical, it's something that's intrinsically valuable. It lets you put some money outside of the financial system and yet have something liquid. And it's a fallback, in times of really bad crises. And a lot of people are looking for that. They might not know they're looking for it, but usually once they find it, they're quite happy to have found it. And so I think people get more worried about what's happening in the world. There will be more and more people coming into these kind of metals.
Well, some great insights from you there. Well, thank you so much, Gregor, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
That was Gregor Gregersen, who is the founder of Silver Bullion Group. This has been The Wealth Tracker with me, Hongbin Jeong.
Before acting on the information on Money FM, please consider if it's suitable for your own investment objectives, financial situation, and risk tolerance. To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.